Hi, boys and girls. This is Grandma Sheila again with this week's Christmas story. You know, by the end of this week, by the time you're hearing this story, it will be almost Christmas. Our story today is called Empty Boxes. Christina and Albert weren't like a lot of the other people around them. They had no aunts, they had no uncles, they had no cousins, but they did have one grandmother, and she lived far away on a ranch in Oregon. Well, the one thing about that grandma was that even though she lived so far away, she always sent them a big box full of everything they might want for Christmas. And they never knew how she knew what to get, but she always did. Well, Albert and Christina lived in a small apartment with their mother. You know, it was getting close to the time for another Christmas to come. And grandmother sent a letter. And the letter said, "This year, I'm not sending you presents. I'm coming to see you." And Christina went, "Does that mean, Albert, that she's not bringing any presents?" Albert said, "I don't know. It costs a lot to travel, you know. Maybe she won't have any money. Maybe it's come see us or send presents, and she's decided to come." And Albert, he said, "You know, I wanted an airplane this year with a real motor in it so it could fly. And I wanted a blue-eyed baby doll." And Mother said, "Shame on you, too. Christmas isn't about getting. Be glad your grandmother's coming to visit you." They had never seen their grandmother. Now, Albert, he was 9, and Christina was 5. Well, they decorated their tree with popcorn and other things that Mother had. And they waited for Christmas Day, because that was the day they would go to the train station and pick Grandma up. Well, little Christina had thought, how are we going to know which one's Grandma? Because they'd never seen her. And Albert said, well, Mom will probably know. So Christmas morning came, and Mother let the kids go under the Christmas tree and shake each of those boxes to listen to see what was in them. Well, they felt of those boxes and they shook them, but they all sounded like and felt squishy like clothes. Well, unfortunately, not all children know the benefit of getting new clothes. Well, Mother said, get your coats on. And they did, and they went and they drove to that train station. And the train was already there. And inside the station, Albert, he saw a short little lady with sparkling eyes. And he said, "Christina, there she is. There she is. She has eyes just like Father used to have." Well, Father had died, but Albert was right. That was Father's mother, their grandmother. They were going to get her in the car, and Albert and Christina, they looked at Grandma after she'd hugged them, and all she had was her purse. And they thought, an airplane with a motor and a big doll wouldn't fit in that purse. Maybe Albert was right. There wasn't enough money for Grandma to come and still have presents. But then Grandma, after she'd hugged them both, took out some little tags, little cardboard-like tags out of her purse. And she walked over to a window that above it said baggage. And she gave them those little pieces of cardboard. And they came bringing out a big box. And Albert looked at Christina and he said, "It's big enough to hold our two presents." And then there was Grandma's suitcase. Well, the man was good enough to carry it out to Mother's car. But my, he had a hard time getting that big box. Grandma had said it was a trunk that had belonged to her mother, and she had put quilts in it, and she thought Christina might like it. Well, finally, the man got it in the trunk, but he had to leave the door open on the trunk, and he hung out the back, and they started toward home. Well, when they got that big trunk in the living room and the box suitcase and things that Grandma had brought, they opened it up, and out came present after present after present. And Mother said, "Now that Grandma's here, we can open our presents." And they did. And yes, there was that airplane with a motor, and there was a blue-eyed dolly, a beautiful, great big dolly that when you laid her down, she shut her eyes just like she was going to sleep. Plus, there were things they didn't even know they wanted. Grandmas are like that, you know. Well, by then, all the presents were open, and there was paper strewn all over their little living room, and there were boxes that everything had come in. It was a big mess, and Mother was starting out to the kitchen to finish getting dinner ready, and she said to Albert, "I want you to gather up all the wrapping paper in all those boxes and take them out to the garbage can." Grandmother went, "No." And Mother said, "Why?" And she said, "Save all the paper, and I'll iron it tomorrow, and we'll have it to use for another time." And she looked at her mother-in-law and she said, "We never keep the paper." But Grandma said, "I always do, because we did when I was little, and I still do it." So Albert gathered up all that paper and he gave it to his grandmother. And Mother said, "Our apartment's too little to keep all the boxes." And Grandma said, "That's fine. I always keep them." So I don't know if she was going to take them home on the train or what. When Grandma was taking that paper, she was smoothing it over her legs. And then she would gently fold it all up. And she took one of the boxes and she filled it up with all that paper. She picked up one piece of paper and it had holly leaves and holly berries on it. She said, "This reminds me of the paper from the best Christmas I ever had. And Albert and Christina looked at Grandma and said, "Tell us, Grandma, tell us the story about your best Christmas. Did you get lots of presents? What did you get?" And Grandma said, "Nothing." "Nothing?" Albert said, "What kind of a Christmas is it without presents?" So Grandma said, "Come sit down over here, and I'll tell you about my best Christmas." She said, "It all started when I was 5 years old. And my brother, Joel, he was about you guys' age. He was 9 and I was 5, just like you. The afternoon before Christmas, Father had come and he told Mother, he said, 'I'm going off to get the Christmas presents.' And you know, the day before, I and my brother Joel had gotten an envelope from our grandmother, and in it was 2 round gold pieces, $20 gold pieces, and a letter from Grandma saying, 'I want you to have a really nice Christmas, and I'm hoping that this year you'll learn that the joy of Christmas is giving. I hope you will share and learn to share.'" Well, they had taken those 2 gold pieces, Christina hers and Joel his, and they started making a list. They said, Grandma said we should give to somebody. I know what we can do. We'll each give $2 that we can save for the circuit rider. Well, the circuit rider was a man that rode around on his horse from little town to little town all over the state. And when he got to a town, he would preach there. They sometimes would give him part of the offering, and that's what he lived on. So they were going to give $2 a piece to the circuit rider. And then they thought, we need to get presents for Mom and Dad. Let's see. Dad says he wants mittens and a hat. And Mom says she's just tired of venison, which was deer meat that Father caught. She wanted a turkey and cranberries and powdered sugar. The kids thought, it's all decided. And then they wrote down what they wanted. Joel wanted a .22 rifle, and Christina wanted a blue-eyed baby doll. It had to have real hair, and it had to have eyes that opened and closed and would shut when she laid her down. She knew just what she wanted. Well, they made their list, and they gave it to Father, plus their 2 $20 gold pieces. And Mother sent the little bit of grocery money she had saved for Christmas along with Father. And he got in their bobsled with the horses on the front, and he started out. He said, "Don't wait up for me. I'll probably be really late." Well, Henryville was a long ways away, and it's a place there in Oregon by the Blue Mountains, but it's not there anymore. That's what Grandma said. That town, Henryville, isn't there anymore. But Father, the kids stayed home with Mother, busily through that day doing things and being excited about Christmas. Well, Father, he set off, and things did not go as he had planned. First of all, he met Dr. Turner at the base of one of the mountains in his wagon, and the wagon was broken down, and he was on his way to Mrs. Stevens' house to deliver her baby. Well, Father, he got down out of their bobsled. He helped put that wheel back on and fix it all up. Well, it took a while. He looked at his watch and he thought, I still have time to get there. Dr. Turner, he said, you know, keep your eye out for a young family. They just recently moved up by the mine, and I saw their little twins. They are so sick, I told them they had to take them to Portland because there was nothing I could do. So watch out for them. Father got a little ways further down the road, and Henryville was one of the last places that had a stagecoach. The stagecoach had broken down, and the driver was a young guy, a young kid. He didn't know how to fix it. So Father, he got down from their bobsled, and he took all the time that was needed to fix that stagecoach, and the stagecoach went on its way. Father looked at his watch again. He said, I've got to really hurry now. So he set off at a gallop over that snow. And then, toward the edge of the road, he saw one horse attached to an old wagon. And the man, he was trying to make that horse go. He was calling to it to giddy up. He was clicking the reins over top of the horse, but the horse was stubborn and refused to move. Well, Father could see they were in trouble, and he thought, I wonder. But he didn't see any sick little boys. But he stopped and he went over and he said, what seems to be the trouble? And the man said, is there any way that you could take us to the train station in Henryville? Our little boys, they're about 5 years old, and they're so sick, the doctor says if we don't get them to Portland, they're going to die. But Father, he looked about, and he didn't see any little boys. And the mother was crying, and she said, come here. So Father followed her around to the back of the wagon, and in the back of the wagon was a box about this big. And when she lifted up the quilt, there were those two little 5-year-old boys, all wrapped up tightly in blankets with just their little faces showing. And they were white like sheets, but they were burning up with fever. Mother said, please, can you take us? Father said, yes. And he went back to the young man and he said, unhook your horse. Just pull your wagon off to the side of the road. It'll be fine. And your horse will go on home by itself. Get in. And he took that big box and he put it in the back of the bobsled. And they started off as fast as they could go. And it was like their two horses knew that they needed to go as fast as they could go. Well, they got to Henryville, to the train station, and when Dad looked at his watch, he knew that they had a half an hour. They had made it in time to get those little sick kids and their parents and the little girl on the train. But when Father went to try to help bring the little boys and stuff over to the train, the conductor came out and he stood up. He said, what's wrong with those boys? Well, they didn't know what was wrong with them. They just knew they had a fever and were really sick. And the conductor said, you can't bring them on the train. They might give it to somebody else. And the father, he pleaded, oh, please. And then he remembered that Dr. Turner had sent a letter with him. And he said, I have a letter from the doctor. He gave it to the conductor and he read it and he went, oh, all right. You guys can travel in the caboose. They went to get the little boys. And then the man said they had gone to buy those tickets. Said, we don't have enough money for both of us to go. Either the father could go with the sick children or the mother could go. And kids, my father, he knew that mother probably couldn't do this all by herself. She needed her husband there. So father stuck his hand in his pocket. He pulled out the letter that his mother had sent to the kids, and he read what she had to say. And the kid that had been running the stagecoach that day had given him $2. So he had a little extra money. But then he got to thinking about it. He took those two $20 gold pieces out of his pocket. And he took the grocery money out of his pocket. And he put those $2 on top. And he gave it to the father of those two little sick boys. He said, I know you'll need to eat and stay somewhere when you're in Portland. You'll need this. They got on the train and they went away. And father thought, Mr. McDonald at the store, he always told me I could have credit if I wanted it, but I always told him no. But today I'll tell him I want it. Then we can still have Christmas, in spite of the fact that we had to help all these people. So he got on the bobsled and he went as quick as he could to that general store. And he went up to the door and the door wouldn't open. He tried so hard. He pulled and he pulled, but there was nobody there. He pounded on the window. Nobody came. Nobody at all. It was closed. He couldn't believe it. He just stood there. And then one of the men that my father knew came by and he said, oh, McDonald had sold most of his Christmas stuff, so he took the stagecoach and went to see his children. But there was nothing anybody could do about it. What was father going to do? There was no money left for Christmas. The store wasn't open, and the store man was gone. He'd be gone till after Christmas. What was he going to do? And boys and girls, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to wait till next week to find out what Father did so they could have Christmas. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye now.